Crossroads, where one road leads to the end of humanity, another to Elysium. As far-fetched as that sounds, right now might just be the point at which a choice must be made, so that the momentum doesn't carry us onto a road leading to a shrouded destination where you can catch glimpses of the end spilled in blood. For billions of years, life on Earth has competed for the limited amount of resources, constantly growing more and more complex. Today, at the top of this competition stand we, the humans, so far above the rest that the question of who is in the second place is essentially a foreign concept, that if answered would most likely nominate the viruses that infect us, the livestock we breed, or maybe cats. But even the most arrogant representation of how much better than the rest of the life on Earth we are wouldn't be fair to us, because the competition that drives humanity is no longer biological. It's instead something immaterial. What evolves in this competition is not us, but instead the immaterial animals for which we are the cells. At the simplest level, and least like an immaterial animal, is a system of two early humans, who when together are capable of more tasks, and respond to each other's stimuli, altering ways in which each individual would act. Here humans hardly differ from other life on Earth. They have trouble communicating complex ideas, they don't understand why water sometimes falls from the sky, and they can't make complicated tools. The immaterial animal has just been born. Then, as time goes on and generations of people live and die, the animal grows until two people that hardly, if at all, differ from the original ones biologically, are capable of drawing from the animal to build tools and machines, to discuss philosophy, science and art, or watch bad YouTube videos. A scientist of today is no more intelligent than the one of the far past, and yet the scientist of today can achieve that which the one from the far past couldn't even dream of. Because the scientist of today can draw upon the immaterial animal in the form of knowledge that has been collected over thousands of years, and in the form of structures that force specific behaviors onto people. A patent is an idea that exists as something immaterial, yet it's a structure that affects the material world and drives the creation of things that we couldn't make in the past. This capacity growth of people, despite the lack of biological change, is already impressive. But to truly witness the immaterial beasts, we have to look at the scale of nations. If we isolate a single nation, we can see different people with different skills, each performing specialized tasks, interacting with each other, forming larger and larger structures that each fulfill some specific function that is needed for the nation to exist. In turn, the nation and its structures are what provide the ability for the people to be specialized in narrow fields, which is the same as a biological animal, which has cells that are specialized for specific tasks and that couldn't survive on their own without the whole animal. On the other side, we also see people like cells of malignant tumors, growing and feeding themselves at the expense of the country and its people. A simplified look at an isolated nation's structure largely matches that of a biological animal, but there is a core difference that elevates the immaterial animal far above the biological. Cells of a biological animal are for most part strictly for that animal. Other animals can consume those cells and then use their energy and nutrients, but they cannot integrate the cells and the larger structures they make up as they are. Our systems of immaterial animals, however, can assimilate. A cell of one system can at any moment move to another and contribute just as much or more to its new system, while the systems themselves can merge to become one or split up to become many. This amorphous configuration leads to a rapid exchange of ideas and information that allows for a constant evolution that is tested not by generations, but instead by possibly days or less. World-altering ideas can travel the globe sometimes within hours, and then die just as fast if faced by another that is greater. Furthermore, the similarities extend past the structure and into the space that the systems occupy. Or in other words, the name of the game of our systems is still survival of the fittest. Even if something like the structure of patent mentioned earlier has ended up benefiting both the nations and the people, the benefit for the people is simply us being lucky. That the configurations that lead to the most power for the nation tend to also lead to the well-being of the people. Which is why we see that despite ups and downs, the total liberty of the people is steadily increasing with time. But there is a problem. Such assumption relies on the fact that people are a resource and that prosperous people tend to produce more than destitute ones. However, both of these assertions are currently being challenged. Human as a resource by AI and by the manipulation machine that convinces the people to cheer for their own downfall. Manipulation of the populace has always existed. But today, the sophistication and the reach of this manipulation has grown to the point where a large portion of people subscribe to the Ministry of Orange Truth, claiming that the United States had always been at war with Canada. Truths and convictions are fluid, changing on a whim, only consistency being the opposition of all-powerful, yet at the same time utterly incompetent enemy. This puts the historic trend towards social progress in question. Because if people make decisions not based on the reality, but instead on the perceptions of reality presented to them by the media, will those people act when the quality of their life deteriorates? Or will they celebrate because deterioration is a price worth paying to destroy the enemy? The fear of humans being replaced by the machines is nothing new either. But never have we been in a situation where at risk is not just the menial labor, but also the labor of human mind. In the past, when technological innovation replaced the work of the people, it gave way for people to do more specialized and more complex work, ultimately leading not to the substitution of the people, but instead to the elevation of the people. AI threatens to take away both the modern menial tasks and the elevated tasks that would under historic circumstances be taken up by the people. So the question is only whether or not the current AI models are capable of achieving high enough levels, and if not, how fast do we find the next innovation that can? The answer is probably very soon, because the mind of a human works very similar to the large language models. We are constantly battered with stimuli that get sent through our neural networks and lead to an output of some action. If there is a major distinction between AI and the brain, it is most likely in the origin of consciousness. If consciousness originates from some fundamental physical process that is present in the brain but not in the computer, then AI as it's now won't be able to replace it fully. If consciousness originates from the structure instead, then AI is already conscious, and the current methods with few more years of progress are likely to replace us fully. Combine the two, and we have something that seems almost like an inevitability. The social manipulation prevents people from unifying towards shared goal. The lack of unity allows for the blind trust towards power by few wealthy who are so far removed from normal life that they are with no concern playing a game with real lives on the line. This battle for power leads to the rapid development of AI and other technology, which eventually grows to be advanced enough to replace most humans. Then, when conflict arises, and the costs must be reduced in order to survive, problems start to become apparent. This is a point at which the logical decision in order to survive is to murder the people who consume more and produce less than a robot. In a relatively good case scenario, where about half of the people are still a resource and have the power to say that they will not stand for such indiscriminate murder, unless this stance is mirrored by a significant majority of power, the result is simply that the states, which decided to be moral, are less powerful, and so the ones that lose the conflict and are eventually forced to enact this culling regardless. This would mean that in the future, conflicts will threaten the end of humanity in more ways than just the nuclear weapons. But the destruction during conflict is not even the real danger, as it's not that different from the danger that nuclear or biological weapons already pose. The real danger comes at the time of peace, where conflict is possible but not inevitable. Now the elimination of those who are a cost is not a sudden culling, but instead a slow trickle that can be justified and gotten used to. If another nation starts to reduce the people who are a cost, it threatens to become powerful enough that other nations cannot face it militarily or economically. So the other nations face a pressure to enact those same reductions, meaning that at this point just the possibility of a conflict is enough to threaten the humanity. Even if we assume that AI today is not even close to replacing most people, to think that no such technology will ever exist is at best lazy and obtuse, especially when changing the minds of people takes a long time, and there are people actively working towards an exit that almost guarantees that we are moving towards the future in which we have no choice. This exit in the United States is ideologically headed by Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin. If you read their ideas, you think that these are just some fringe schizophrenics, cosplaying historians in their mom's basements, and not influential thinkers who are connected to arguably the most powerful people today in Musk, Vance, and Trump. To them, exit is an idea that people are too stupid for democracy to work. So instead, we need to configure the world such that it's run by few strong autocrats who control their states as CEOs, who have no responsibility towards the people of the state. Idea being that the people can freely move between the states, forcing those states to provide for the people worth keeping, while those who do not produce can be humanely genocided. There is a lot that can be said about the stupidity of their ideas, but the main issue in the context of this video is the facilitation of perfect conditions for blind evolution towards power that cannot be opposed by the people. On the other side of the exit is the voice. An idea that while the system might be broken, or even on its last legs, it can be fixed from within. Both sides agree that the system as it stands now cannot function much longer. But those on the side of the voice believe that people have the capacity to care and to understand, and we can do far more than we have relegated ourselves to. Right now, the average person votes not based on policy, but based on vibes and on affiliation to a group, because the average person does not understand the policy. I say that not as an insult to the average person, instead as an acknowledgement of just how complicated the world has become. To understand the policy means to understand the systems that have grown so complicated that it takes hours upon hours of reading just to understand them on a basic level. So complicated that they control us arguably more than we control them. And it makes sense to look at them as animals, because we can poke and push to guess what happens, but we cannot fully understand and predict. In face of this lack of understanding, we seek the simple solutions. We seek to represent reality not as a rational, amoral system with flaws that ought to be fixed, but instead as a fight between good and evil. This way we have a simple solution. Get rid of the evil and all will be fixed. There is no need to understand the economy, the systems of government, the geopolitical implications or anything else. Such outlook then leads to the strongman populist leaders, who will fix everything, because they are the only ones who can fight the evil responsible for all the bad. There need not be any talks of policy, because the solution is simple: destroy the evil. It's okay to lie about the evil people, because they are evil and need to be stopped no matter the cost. Doesn't matter that all that makes them evil might be lies to begin with. For the voice to prevail, what changes must be the people. We must understand that the world is not fair, that the rights and freedoms that we still enjoy are not given. They were taken by the people before us, who sacrificed themselves for the better world, and by forgetting we throw away those sacrifices and condemn the people of the future to sacrifice again, assuming that there even is another chance. The first hurdle we must jump over is the pessimism towards the world as it still stands, and to understand that the pessimism towards an imperfect yet mostly good system is exactly what causes someone like Trump to gain power and actually make the system go to shit. The world right now is not perfect, and it's starting to get unraveled, but it's also in aggregate the best time ever to be alive. In the last 100 years, global literacy rate has grown from 30% to 83%. The population of people with access to internet has grown from 1 billion in 2005 to 5.5 billion in 2024. The level of information, and hence the opportunity that is available to the poor today, is unimaginable compared to even only 20 years ago, yet alone 100 years ago. Global infant mortality rate has decreased from around 140 deaths per 1,000 births in 1950 to 30 today, while in Western countries it's as low as 1.6 deaths per 1,000, and even in the United States, which is highest among the developed world at 5.4, is a vast improvement. Just the same, global real income, which reflects how much can actually be bought given the prices at the time, has been steadily growing, momentarily taking a hit in 2022 because of the COVID, but otherwise been higher than ever in most nations. Even in the United States, which if we trust the internet has been doing absolutely horribly, has eclipsed the real wage peak of the 70s. When politicians in Western countries ignore the will of the people, it might at first seem like a corruption, but almost always the root cause is instead apathy. In every Western country, there's a large number of people who don't vote, especially in elections that are considered minor. What this means is that if a politician wins an election in which 40% of the people participated in, it's possible that as little as 20% of the total population voted for that politician, and hence the politician will govern against the majority. Just like that, what seems like corruption at first is with further investigation simply the politicians serving the voters. Additionally, it's possible for every single person to support a policy that is rejected by politicians while enacting the will of the voters. All we have to do is assume that the policy is superseded by another. If there are two politicians, one whose plan supports yellow ducks and undermines green parrots, while the other's plan undermines yellow ducks and supports green parrots, I, as a supporter of both yellow ducks and green parrots, will have to support one policy that I do not support. In an idealized two-variable political system, such a scenario wouldn't actually be possible, because a third candidate who supports both the ducks and the parrots would emerge, allowing me to vote in support of both of my policies. In the real world, however, there are far more variables, and the information of what exactly will the people vote for impossible to acquire fully. This allows for corrupt disregard for the will of the people, but only on matters towards which the people are mostly apathetic. Because if the issue is important enough to the people, the candidate who supports both the ducks and the parrots would still emerge. Housing, especially in large cities, is an issue right now, but most people are misidentifying the root cause of the issue. It's an issue of people viewing housing as a tool by which to build wealth. When this happens, homeowners, most of whom are older and hence more likely to vote, are incentivized to prevent new housing from being built, leading to a limited supply and hence increased prices. Every large city that has solved expensive housing has done so simply by building more housing. It should be clear that the world of today is worth protecting and advancing. And if it's clear, we must understand that we are stepping towards an unknown future with potentially dire and permanent consequences. Progress is the foundation of that what makes us human. But now we need to take the control, so that the progress we see is not the inevitability of the evolution's race for power, but instead a controlled process used with precision to further that which we as an educated populace that understands ourselves deem to be the best for us as a collective. A populace that is capable of individually stepping over that individuality to ultimately maximize that individuality through collective progress. Capitalism is a great example of such a controlled progress. We need capitalism because global resource allocation is too complicated to manually plan. But in a pure form, it's a system that evolves for power, which tends to lead to generally undesirable results. So to ensure that the system evolves for us, we implement labor, antitrust, and other laws that try to maximize the benefit and minimize the cost. Unfortunately, predicting the exact downstream effects of a law is still very difficult. And even when the effect is there, the average person is unlikely to attribute the effect to the legislation that caused it, which if combined with bad actors taking advantage of the complexity, leads to an opposite perception, where growth is attributed to the hard work of oneself and the decline to the system. Then, as the prevalence of such perception grows, by pushing not for incremental changes, but massive reforms, people ensure a self-fulfilling prophecy of a broken system, a la most recently Trump's America. This to say that the solutions won't be simple and obvious. And even more importantly, they cannot be emotionally driven by individual circumstances, but instead rationally by separating the faults of the individual from the faults of the system. Then, with this understanding in hand, we go and understand another thing. The best politician is a selfish politician that is rewarded the most by doing the most good for the people. And the best businessman is just the same a selfish one. Only condition being that people know and demand that what is good for them. Both democracy and capitalism is built on the principle that selfish people will do good if rewarded. If people don't understand what is good for them, refuse to demand that what is good for them, or refuse to reward lavishly those who provide the most good, neither democracy nor capitalism can function. If we want to hope and pray for a benevolent leader to fix everything, we might as well stop wasting the time and go back to embracing autocracy, because that is a system of benevolence. Before the explosion of social media, uneducated masses were far more isolated and disenfranchised, meaning that the beliefs of the uneducated could be for most part ignored and controlled. Today we do not have such luxury. The internet allows the stupidity in its simplicity to fester and eventually take over as dominating political power. In the age of social media, we cannot stow away the uneducated by symbolically placating them. We need all people to be educated. In the end, prescription is to normalize the condemnation of the uneducated who, despite their lack of understanding, feel like they have a God-given right to an opinion on any topic and are unaware of the stupidity of claiming any understanding after research that best consists of reading the titles of news articles and watching podcasts. But the goal of the condemnation is not the humiliation or anything of the sort. The goal is the promotion of a culture that values knowledge and understanding.